How are you, friend?
There we go.
There you are.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to
Yeah,
see you on a beautiful day here.
is it?
It is.
Well, you stole our weather apparently because it's a really blustery, windy day here.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm
we'll
happy
let
for
you
you.
have that.
What, say again?
We'll let you have the wind in the blustery day then.
And I won't begrudge you one that's beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for doing this today.
Yeah, it's good to be able to do it. Looking forward to it. With a
Good.
little trepidation, but looking forward to it. So let's see.
Yeah. I just always look forward to your calls, and I came into this saying it. I think I'm just going to approach this like it's Stan calling me out of the blue and saying, Gwen, how are you doing? Because I always look forward to, you have such a pastoral presence, and I know you deeply care about what's going on with CFDM and those of us in it.
Mhm.
So I wanted the people that we serve to hear from you, and I wanted to hear from you today because it's been a couple of weeks since we talked voice to voice, I think, right?
It has been, yes.
Yeah. So I sent you a few topics and said we might jump off on this, and you sent me one back and said I'd like to talk about this, and that's really what I wanted to happen anyway. So I'm glad you did. And can we just dive into what you
Let's dive.
kind of talk about a little bit?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, during the pandemic that we're going through, it's very easy to get focused on the situation and the political drama that's going on across our nation and everything like that. And sometimes it's easy to lose sight of those things that give life and enjoyment. And I guess what I'd like to begin very quickly, so I don't take too much time with this, but what is it that has really been fun for me during this last couple of months? And we have had fun. We, being my wife, Nancy, and I, have had fun. From ducks that have come into our yard, a couple of mallard pair, and watching them, watching deer chase them down a path, to seeing eagles. I would guess there was one time we saw at least 8 eagles flying and fighting over food. It was just an amazing, amazing sight, and some really very good pictures from that.
Yeah. Not unlike what's happening on the ground for some folks, right?
So I thought I cut that off. Sorry about that. I thought I turned it all off.
It's rather pleasant anyway.
So,
hey, Stan, just for some reference, where do you live?
yes, that'd
Tell
be
us where you
good.
live.
So we live in Squim, outside of Squim, about 1/3 of a mile up from Dungeness Spit. So from our deck, we get a view of Strait of Juan de Fuca, or Salish Sea as it's now called. Squim is definitely a retirement town, and situated in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. Beautiful area, gorgeous area. We are in the rain shadow of the Olympic Mountains. So Seattle gets 30 some inches rain a year, and we get maybe 15. So we are in a rain shadow, I think probably even less than 15. Which that doesn't always mean it's sunny out, but we don't get the rain. So
I'm starting to feel like I want to take back what I said about how
the weather.
the nice weather today. Yeah.
Yes, we do have nice weather. Enjoyment. I do have to add one more thing, very, very personal. My oldest son, Andrew, and his wife, Christy, have not been able to have children, and they've been trying to adopt for some time now. And yesterday was the final process of adoption. So they were supposed to go to court and have a hearing, but because of the COVID-19, they cannot do that. So instead, the judge called them at 9 o'clock, and they live in Issaquah, up in the highlands of Issaquah. Called them at 9 o'clock and did the judge's thing of proclaiming it an official adoption. And Nancy and I drove over from here to there, and then my younger son, Peter, came up from Tacoma. And we were outside, so Andrew, Christy, and Isaac live on the second floor of an apartment complex, but we're on a path, on a hillside below them, and celebrating with them. And that
Wow.
definitely was a source of joy and tears and just an amazing time.
Congratulations to you all.
Yeah, Grandpa again. Only twice, but this is a special. It's been a long time process. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that have given life and enjoyment in the midst of a pandemic. That definitely has taken its toll of lives and suffering of so many people, and I think is creating quite a havoc within the nation itself. So that's the joy. I guess the other question I had that I kind of offered was just, what am I learning through all of this time?
Yeah.
That's a little more challenging, I think, for me to answer, because it isn't as if there are huge events that this is a huge learning insight that I'd never had before. I think probably what I'm learning has been building on a lifetime of learning. One of the things, I guess, is for a quiet time, for quite a few weeks anyway, during that time, I was reading Eugene Peterson's, rereading for the second or third time the book of what is called Long Obedience in the Same Direction, I think it's called. It's his book on the Psalms of Ascent. And one of those Psalms, I'm not sure which one it is right now, I'd have to go back, talked about God's blessing, and I just began to think through God's blessings in my life. And I began to realize that so many of the things that have been God's blessings are not things that I anticipated. They were actually, I anticipated one thing and it did not turn out that way. For example, I'll say with a spiritual direction. I began pondering whether to be a spiritual director probably 25 years ago. And at one point was going to do that. And there was something that said no. So I brought together a clearance committee, the Quaker process of clearness committee, Quaker process of discernment.
Sure.
And in that discerning time with a number of others from a congregation I served, we all knew very quickly that I was not to go. But my wife at the time of 40 years, Diane, was to become a spiritual director. And she ended up doing that through Pecos, New Mexico, through a program there. So finally, it became my turn in about 2016, I guess, a number of years after my wife Diane had died from cancer. And God brought about CFDM. I had no information about it. I didn't know about it. I had never heard of it. I'd never heard of any of those who are involved in it. But I found it on the internet. And I was looking at a number of different programs, but they were all far distant. And there were a couple local, but they were not fitting into my time schedule at all. And there I ended up with CFDM, and what a blessing that has been. It's not something I expected. And the timing definitely was not what I expected.
Yeah.
But it has been a blessing in so many different ways. But even as I completed the course, my expectations were that in retirement, I would have all kinds of directees and that would be my ministry. And I ended up moving to SQUIM, and those that I had did not want to do it long distance. So for a long time, I didn't have any. Now I have one. And I thought, God, what are you doing?
Right.
And instead, what he did was he brought me onto the board of CFDM.
Yes, you did. Yes.
You know, things that you never plan on, never anticipate, become tremendous blessings. And I spent that morning just thinking through a whole lifetime of experiences that didn't ever plan on. And some of them were very difficult, but still blessings. So I think that's one of the learnings from this time. Not a great insight, not something unusual, but a building up of a whole lifetime of experiences.
And isn't that the way with so much of our shaping and our movement in God? It is little by little, and Scripture tells us that, little by little, and we're not even aware maybe that it's happening in the moment. It just feels hard, or it feels surprising, as you say. And then
I don't
build up history.
Yeah, I don't think anyway, I can't say we for everybody, but I'm not aware of a lot of what God is doing, except in retrospect. I begin to see, this has changed.
Yeah.
There are times, even the last week or two, I think, okay, I'm not super in tune with what's happening in me. Sometimes I think that old adaptive self is more central than a new creation. And then I say, okay, but once in a while I can see the new creation pop out in compassion or care, and not always aware of what God's doing, but God is still at work.
Or might I offer even the capacity to enjoy be content during a very difficult time.
Oh, yeah, I think that's true too. I think so.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things God is doing during this time is kind of showing how hidden God is. I mean, I'd love to say that God is always right there and visible and that I can see God at work. One of the things I did in preparation for this interview even was to reread my journal starting about the 25th of February on to the present. And I was recounting with Nancy this morning some of the themes of that. And I think one of the themes is that I want more of God than what I call bookend experiences. And what I mean by that is, for as long as I can remember, I've had a quiet time in the morning. And now in retirement, I get to spend a fair amount of time. And it's always on the deck in the morning, pretty much year round. We have a covered deck, and just it's beautiful. And I'm able to spend that time there. And then in the evening, before bed, Nancy and I both spend time kind of in the examine process, but we do it separately. And again, I'm on the deck. But I want more, that's the kind of the bookends of a day. Yeah. And I want more of God than the bookends. And I think that's one of the themes that comes out over and over again in the journaling. That desire for an awareness of God during the day beyond the bookends. But so much of that is God's hiddenness. And I think, well, if God, this triune God of ours is actually living inside, then maybe the place to look is not always in the experiences, but inside at this new person that's being shaped, and even the thoughts and the feelings. And I'm not very good at that.
Wow.
I'm not very good. But that's kind of, maybe that's one of the growing edges for me at this point.
Yeah, that's profound. If God is living inside, the place to notice is by looking inside this person that's being shaped. Yeah.
I think so. I finished one of my books, so I went to my library and decided, okay, I want a new book to read because one of the things I do in my quiet time in the morning is I part of that time is kind of spiritual reading. And I picked out a book, I don't know if I even have it right here. Let's see, I gotta look at here.
I want to look at the library. Some great books.
It's called Soul Wilderness by Carrie Walters. And I picked it out and I thought, I don't think I've ever read this before. And then I began looking at it, and it was all marked up. And I thought, I guess I have. And then I looked at the front cover and I knew right away it wasn't my book. One of my mentors was a man named Doug Anderson, Dr. Doug Anderson. For a while, I was head of Presbyterian Counseling Services when I worked on a master's program in marriage and family therapy. Then became a leader in Lutheran Counseling Network. And during the last 7.5 years, I was pastor at Grace Lutheran Church in Des Moines, Washington, and he was a member. And he was not only a mentor of mine, but became a brother. And when he died, he had told his wife, well, one, he asked me before that I would do his funeral sermon service. But he had told Joan, his wife, that a number of people could go through his library and pick out books. And this is one of 20 that I picked out of his library. And it's Soul Wilderness that looks at the fact that the desert fathers and mothers went out to the wilderness to find God during a time when they felt the church was vacating God. And now that desert experience is within us, and it's looking inside. So it's part of that journey. So God said, here's a book that you need at this point in time. Nice. You want to look inside? Okay, here you go.
Yeah. I've heard the phrase COVID wilderness used in that way, because so many of us are taking that approach to the time and saying, well, we may not go looking for it, but guess what? It's sort of being handed to us.
Yeah. And, my concern early on was, as I visited with people or heard people talk, that in this stay at home, be safe time for us in Washington, people were filling up the time with all kinds of stuff and all kinds of activities.
That's what we do, Stan. Come on.
That's exactly what we do.
It is.
And
Yeah.
I said, I don't want to do that. This is a time that we can, and we can spend a little different kind of quality time. But it is that human nature that we tend to be busy and running and doing.
I don't know about you, but as the time has gone on, I've heard more and more people, and then as talk about opening up has increased, I've heard more and more people say, you know, I've really enjoyed, I've come to enjoy the experience of not having the pressure of being out, or not having to feel like I have to fill up my time, almost as if it was they'd given themselves finally permission, or something outside themselves had given them permission to do something that we want to do and we don't know we want to do it.
Yeah.
A way of being we don't know we want.
And I think that's, hopefully that's true of people. That's what I say.
Certainly not everyone,
Hopefully
but
can be more aware of some of those longings
sure.
For a little quieter kind of experience of life.
It's given us opportunity to notice, as you say, that
Mhm.
possibility of looking somewhere besides outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Here we are with everywhere I go, there I am, someone says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's part of life under COVID-19.
Yeah, it is.
We get to spend a little more time pondering anyway.
Well, what I hear you saying is that you're holding both things. You've got the enjoyment of these great celebrations in one hand, just enjoying nature and enjoying the insights and the time you get to have, and then these great opportunities, and then this also wilderness experience of looking inside. I'm just so excited for you with your
And I
family.
think there's also been, there have been times, I retired for the second time in 2017. And that was kind of that final time from pastoral ministry. And I think I'm probably still going through an adjustment time of retirement. I'm in the Enneagram a 2. I need to be needed. And I have journaled during this time saying, it feels like being put on the shelf a little. At one point, I have to laugh now. I do still a fair amount of reading about the church and what's happening. And it was like, I want to say in what's happening in the church. I don't like not having a voice. And the next day, and I journaled and said, it's like I feel I'm put on a shelf and no longer have a voice, no longer needed in the church. And I think that's part of that old nature, that old adaptive self that has to be needed to get worth and value. And that's part of the learning and growing. On the other hand, the very next day, my pastor called and asked if I do these things and that thing. And it's like, okay, you're just showing me now. You just have to go at a little different pace than I'm used to. As a pastor, it was a little faster pace than now in retirement.
Yeah.
It was funny.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
It does retirement though does allow me to do some things that, well, one, being involved with CFDM, I might have been able to be involved as much, but I'm not sure. But I'm also involved with volunteer hospice here in Clallam County. But on a limited basis, and that was intentional, so that I didn't want to, I could have done bereavement counseling and things like that. But I kind of think that would begin to take a lot of time in small groups. But instead, this volunteer hospice of Clallam County, when somebody dies, volunteer hospice calls the significant other for 13 months, once a month, for 13 months, just checking in with them. So bereavement calling. So I have a lot of people that I call. It's still only 2-3 hours a month. So it's not a lot of time. It gives me that opportunity to make those calls. And it's been interesting with COVID. I think as COVID has happened, people want to talk more.
Oh, yeah.
Especially those who are alone.
And what a difficult time to lose people.
Yeah, it is really hard. And they might have lost them even right before that time, but it still affects them. And so, yeah, that's been an interesting journey with people in a different realm.
Yeah. What I really appreciate, and I'm going to bring us to a close here in just a second, Stan, but what I really appreciate about what you just said, you talked about awareness before, and we often say that's really just the doorway in, because there's a response, right, to that awareness. And what I hear you saying is the real growth is taking place around, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have responded in this way. But knowing what I know is the beginning of the process. Having the information is the beginning of the process. That's and then being willing to surrender to what I know to be true and trust God with what information I've been given.
Yeah, that He will continue. So Paul says, He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion, and you have to hold on to that.
And we're so proud, aren't we, to say, I'll take it
in process.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, I mean, as spiritual directors, you and I both, and I'm hearing all these things, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's go there. Oh yeah, let's go there. This could have become easily a spiritual director. And that's always the joke about there's never a short conversation between two spiritual directors.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
But really, thanks for spending some time with me. I've even gotten to know you better today by being here with you and listening to you talk. I'm a little bit distracted by the animals behind you. I have to say that's such a fun wall. Have you taken some of those photos, or
all of them?
You've really taken them?
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
One of the blessings that I had in the last congregational ministry at Grace Lutheran Church was Grace Lutheran sends out a lot of teams around the world, and that was my area of responsibility with mission teams. So one of those trips was to Uganda, and in that process also went, at the end of that time, went to Tanzania, and I have a very good Tanzanian friend, and went on a safari there. So
beautiful.
Yeah, that's been one of the blessings.
Really lovely pictures. Yeah. Well, listen, blessings on you, and thank you for everything you do for CFDM.
Thank you. Thank you for this time. After the recording, can you and I talk for a bit here?
Yes, we can. I actually don't know how to end the recording. I'm such a pro at this. So maybe I'll just start another one and invite you back in. I probably could take the time to do it. I know I've done it before, but I don't want this to be
we'll say goodbye here then.
Watching, but I'll get right back on with you. And Stan, would you just say a prayer of blessing and so on for our CFDM community and those that are watching, because I'm so grateful for your service to us.
Gracious God, we do thank you for your faithfulness to us, and that no matter what situation we might face, you are Emmanuel, God with us. Thank you that you never leave us or forsake us, that you are present whether we acknowledge that or not. Thank you too for CFDM and for its ministry to people, the training and the formation of lives through CFDM. We ask that you might continue that, even as CFDM seeks to learn to adjust to our new life situation. So we ask for your guidance, your leadership, because without you, we are nothing. So in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Friend, appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
And
Bye.
we'll say goodbye to everybody on the video, and we'll see you in the next one.
That's
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.